My parents cut me off because I followed my passion instead of money. Reddit Storytime. What happens when you choose your dream over your parents' plan? This is a dramatic Reddit-inspired story about family, betrayal, and resilience. The Golden Path. From the moment I could walk, my parents had a plan for me. It wasn't written down, but it hung in the air of our house like wallpaper. Invisible, unchanging, impossible to ignore. My father, a corporate lawyer, believed in stability, prestige, and climbing ladders that always led upward. My mother, a doctor, believed in sacrifice, respect, and the kind of hard work that made strangers call you inspiring. Between the two of them, there was no room for uncertainty, and certainly no room for passion. Growing up, I did everything they asked. Honor roll, extracurriculars, volunteer work that looked good on college applications. I learned how to smile through exhaustion, how to pretend I was interested in things that made me feel empty. I became fluent in the language of achievement. But there was another language I longed to speak. Music. When I sat at the piano, something shifted. The world narrowed to keys and chords, to the way sound could carry my feelings farther than words ever could. At 12, I was writing small melodies. At 15, I was sneaking out to open mics. By 17, I knew this wasn't just a hobby. It was who I was. But every time I hinted at it, my parents shut me down. "You're talented, sure," my dad said once, flipping through a stack of law journals. "But talent doesn't pay the bills. Music can be your passion," my mom added. "But medicine should be your career." Their path was clear: pre-med, medical school, residency, success. It was the golden path, and they expected me to walk it without question. I tried. I really did. When I got into college, I declared biology as my major, like they wanted. I bought the textbooks, sat in the lectures, and copied notes until my hand cramped. But at night, I found myself sneaking into the music building, sliding into practice rooms that smelled faintly of dust and dreams. Those late-night sessions were the only times I felt alive. It wasn't long before a professor in the music department noticed me. He heard me play one evening and asked, "Have you considered switching majors?" The question was like a match dropped in dry grass. I hadn't just considered it. I craved it. The breaking point came sophomore year. I was failing organic chemistry, my GPA crumbling under the weight of something I didn't even want. Meanwhile, I was excelling in every music elective I could squeeze into my schedule. Composition, theory, performance, all A's, all joy. One night, I sat at my desk staring at a half-finished lab report and thought, if I keep going like this, I'll lose myself. So I made the decision. The next day, I walked into the registrar's office and switched my major from biology to music composition. When I told my parents, the fallout was immediate. "You did what?" my father thundered over the phone. "I changed my major," I said, voice shaking but steady. "I can't keep pretending. I want to pursue music." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice sharp. "Then you're on your own." "What?" "If you're going to throw away your future for a childish dream, we won't support it," my dad said. "Financially or otherwise. We're not paying tuition for you to play around." My stomach dropped. "But..." "No buts," he snapped. "You made your choice. Live with it." And just like that, I was cut off. Life without a safety net. The first thing I felt after that call wasn't freedom. It was terror. My parents had always paid my tuition, rent, groceries, everything. I'd lived inside a safety net so thick I didn't even realize it was there until it was yanked away. Suddenly, I was standing on a wire with no net below, dizzy and shaking. The registrar's office called a week later. My tuition bill was overdue. Rent loomed at the end of the month. Even my phone bill, something I'd never thought twice about, was now my responsibility. I had $216 in my checking account. So I did what I had to. I got a job at a coffee shop near campus, waking up at 5 a.m. to pull espresso shots for bleary-eyed students and professors. After class, I picked up shifts tutoring high schoolers in piano. On weekends, I played background music at restaurants, my hands sore from hours on cheap keyboards. It wasn't glamorous. My clothes smelled like burnt milk and grease. My grades slipped from exhaustion. I barely scraped enough to cover rent, often choosing between groceries and textbooks. But I was surviving. And for the first time, survival felt like mine. Of course, doubt stalked me everywhere. Some nights, after another 14-hour day, I'd sit in my tiny room, staring at my calloused fingers, and wonder if my parents were right. Maybe I was throwing away my future. Maybe music was a selfish gamble, a dream too fragile to build a life on. But then I'd think about those late-night practice sessions, about the way a melody could light up a room, about the professor who told me I had something worth sharing. And I'd remember why I chose this path. Because it wasn't just about music. It was about refusing to live someone else's life. The hardest part wasn't the bills. It was the silence. For 20 years, my parents had been my constant background noise. Calls, advice, pressure, arguments. Now nothing. Weeks passed without a word. When my birthday came, there was no card, no call, no acknowledgement at all. Emily, one of my roommates, found me crying in the kitchen that night, hunched over a store-bought cupcake with a single candle. "Hey," she said softly, sitting beside me. "Family isn't always blood." I didn't believe her then, but I clung to the words like a lifeline. Things began to shift the following semester. A professor submitted one of my compositions to a regional competition without telling me. When he announced I'd won first place, I nearly collapsed. The prize wasn't much, just a small scholarship and a performance slot at a local arts festival. But it was validation. Proof that I wasn't just chasing smoke. At the festival, I played my piece before an audience of strangers. When the final note faded, the applause felt like sunlight on my skin. For the first time since being cut off, I thought, maybe I can actually do this. But success didn't erase the struggle. The more recognition I got, the harder I worked, juggling performances, classes, and 2 jobs. Sleep became a luxury. My friends begged me to slow down, but I couldn't. If I slowed down, the bills would swallow me whole. And then came the email. It was from my mother. Short, cold, formal. "We heard about your award. Congratulations. I hope you understand that this doesn't change anything. Until you make a real career choice, you are on your own." The word award, in quotes, cut deeper than the silence had. I cried that night, not because I missed their money, but because I missed them. I missed believing that their love was unconditional. Still, something inside me hardened. Their absence hurt, but it also freed me. Every dollar I earned, every note I played, every risk I took, it was mine. No strings attached. No golden path I had to walk. I was building something raw and uncertain, but it was mine. Months later, I had another breakthrough. A local musician I admired offered me a spot in his small touring group. It wasn't much, low pay, long drives, cramped motels, but it was a chance to see my work come alive on stage. I said yes instantly. On tour, I felt alive in a way I never had before. Every night, we played to tiny crowds in dive bars and community centers. Sometimes we made enough for gas, sometimes we didn't. But when I looked out at the faces in the audience, swaying and smiling, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. And yet, every high came with a shadow. After one show, I scrolled through social media and saw pictures of my parents at a gala. My father in a tux, my mother in a glittering gown, smiling with people who would never understand why their daughter wasn't on the same stage. For a moment, I felt the old pull, the desire to go back, to apologize, to step back onto the golden path they'd laid out. But then I remembered the applause, the way strangers told me my music mattered. And I knew, no gala, no paycheck, no approval could ever replace that. Breaking point. For a while, I believed sheer willpower could carry me forever. I juggled classes, gigs, and 2 part-time jobs, convincing myself exhaustion was just part of the deal. Sleep became a rumor, meals an afterthought. But bodies keep the score. One night after a double shift at the coffee shop and a late gig, I collapsed in the middle of my dorm hallway. My roommate, Emily, found me, pale and barely conscious. She called an ambulance. At the hospital, the doctor told me I was severely dehydrated and malnourished. "You can't keep burning the candle at both ends," he warned. "Your body will quit before your dreams do." I laughed weakly, but inside, panic clawed at me. What if he was right? What if I had sacrificed everything only to lose both my health and my future? After that scare, I slowed down, slightly. I cut one of my tutoring jobs and tried to eat better, but the bills didn't wait. Debt crept closer, late fees piling up like vultures. There were nights I sat in the dark, unable to pay the electricity bill, practicing piano by the dim glow of my laptop screen. Nights when I cried into my hands, whispering, maybe they were right. Maybe I should have just stayed on the golden path. But every time I came close to giving up, something pulled me back. Like the night I played a small open mic and a woman approached me afterward, tears in her eyes. That song, it reminded me of my husband, who passed away last year, she said. Thank you. I needed that. Her words stuck with me. My music mattered, even if my bank account didn't show it. Still, the struggle was relentless. I auditioned for a summer program at a prestigious conservatory, hoping for a scholarship. I poured everything into my performance. When the rejection email came, I nearly smashed my keyboard. I'm not good enough, I told Emily one night, lying on the floor of our apartment. I'm chasing something that doesn't want me. She looked at me firmly. No, you're chasing something most people are too scared to even try for. That takes guts. Don't you dare quit now. Her words didn't erase the pain, but they planted a seed. Maybe failing didn't mean I was doomed. Maybe it meant I was still in the fight. Then, unexpectedly, help came from someone I hadn't thought about in years. Mr. Alvarez, my high school music teacher, reached out after hearing about my struggles from a mutual friend. He invited me to perform at a community fundraiser he was organizing. I almost said no. It felt humiliating to go back, to show how far I'd fallen. But something inside whispered that I should. The night of the fundraiser, I sat at a grand piano in the center of a gymnasium-turned-ballroom, nerves rattling my hands. But as soon as I played, the fear melted. My fingers danced, my heart spilled out, and when I finished, the applause shook the room. Afterward, Mr. Alvarez clasped my shoulder. I always knew you had this in you. Don't let anyone make you forget it. That night changed something in me. I realized that passion wasn't just about chasing dreams in isolation. It was about connection. My music wasn't meant to exist in a vacuum. It was meant to touch people. And even if I never became famous, that was enough reason to keep going. Ironically, my parents heard about the fundraiser too. Small towns carry big echoes, and soon they called me for the first time in months. We saw the pictures, my mother said, her voice clipped. You looked happy. Because I was, I replied. My father cut in. But happiness doesn't pay rent. What happens when the applause dies? What's your plan then? I hesitated, then said something I never thought I'd have the courage to. My plan is to keep playing, to keep creating, to live a life that feels like mine. If that means struggle, so be it. I'd rather be broke and fulfilled than rich and empty. The silence on the other end told me everything. They didn't understand. Maybe they never would. But for the first time, I didn't need them to. The next months were a strange mix of breakthroughs and setbacks. I landed a spot composing background scores for a small indie film. It paid little, but seeing my music woven into a story on screen felt surreal. Then, just weeks later, my laptop crashed, taking half my compositions with it. I sobbed for hours, but then started writing again. Each success was fragile, each failure crushing. But through it all, I kept moving forward. Because the alternative, living the life my parents wanted, felt like death. The breakthrough. The summer after my junior year, everything shifted. I was still juggling jobs and late-night gigs, still barely making rent. But then I got an email that stopped me cold. A regional arts festival wanted to feature my composition as part of their main stage showcase. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Me? On the same stage as professional composers, people whose names I'd studied in class. But the invitation was real, and so was the small stipend they offered. It wasn't much, but to me, it felt like winning the lottery. The night of the performance, I stood backstage, heart pounding, staring at the packed theater. My name was printed in the program. My piece was listed between artists I'd admired for years. When the lights dimmed and I stepped onto the stage, I felt the weight of every sacrifice pressing down on me. Every missed meal, every double shift, every rejection. And then, when I pressed the first key, all of it lifted. The music filled the hall, swelling and breaking, carrying pieces of my story in every chord. By the final note, the audience was on their feet, clapping, cheering. For the first time, I believed I belonged here. After the show, people came up to me, strangers, other musicians, even potential collaborators. One woman, a local arts director, handed me her card. You have something special, she said. Call me. I'd love to work with you. I walked home that night with my heart blazing. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. At first, I thought it would be another lecture. But her voice was different this time. Soft, almost uncertain. We saw the article about your performance, she said. You looked proud. I was, I replied, my voice steady. There was a pause. Your father still thinks you're wasting your potential. But I can't deny you're making something of yourself. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The words I'd wanted for so long, acknowledgement, even if faint, were finally here. But I also realized something. I didn't need their approval anymore. I wanted it, sure, but my worth wasn't tied to it. Thanks for calling, I said simply. And for the first time, I ended the call before she could. The next year was a whirlwind. I got small commissions for film scores, was invited to collaborate with other musicians, even started teaching piano to kids at a community center. Money was still tight, but it trickled in steadier now. The dream was no longer just a dream, it was becoming a career. And every step, every small victory, was mine. One evening, I returned to my old campus for a concert. Walking through the familiar halls, I felt a strange mix of nostalgia and triumph. I passed students lugging lab coats and textbooks, and for a moment, I saw the version of myself I could have been, exhausted, hollow, living someone else's definition of success. Instead, I walked into the music hall and saw my future written in sound and stage lights. The final confrontation with my parents came at graduation. They came, surprisingly. Sat stiffly in the audience, my mother clutching her purse, my father's expression unreadable. When I walked across the stage to accept my degree in music composition, the applause felt like thunder. I looked out into the crowd and, for just a second, locked eyes with them. My father didn't smile, but my mother did. A small, tentative curve of her lips, like maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see me. And that was enough. Looking back now, I don't regret a single thing. Yes, I lost financial security. Yes, I faced nights of hunger, fear, and bone-deep exhaustion. Yes, my parents' love felt conditional in a way that nearly broke me. But I gained something they never could have given me, myself. My parents cut me off for choosing my passion. But in the end, they didn't cut me down. They only forced me to grow.